Hello humanoids and welcome to Halfling Hobbies. I am Halfling Hannah, and if you are watching this video, then it means one of two things. Either one, you like me, in which case, or two, you or someone you love has chosen to be a warlock. In which case, oh yeah! I love Warlocks. I love the class for a variety of reasons that we'll probably get into here. But most of all, I love the DM-player interaction that you get to have with Warlocks that you really don't get to have with any other player class. And so I love Warlocks. This video is a little different. Most of the time I'm solely focused on DMs and DM resources and tips and tricks and things like that, but this one actually could be useful for players as well. So if you are a player or a DM looking to be a Warlock, please make sure you share this video with each other so that you're on the same page, because it's really, really important for this class in particular for DMs and players to have the same expectations. So we are going to talk about the 5 steps that it takes to make incredible Warlocks and Patrons. And I should mention that this is going to focus on the role-playing aspects. There are lots of videos to teach you how to be OP as a Warlock. That's not really what I care about. I care about the story. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So here we go. Before we get into the video, as always, here's your DM question. However, this could be a player question too. So, DM/player question? Here it is. What is your best or worst Warlock experience in D&D? So make sure to answer that down in the comments below. I cannot wait for all of the amazing stories that I'm sure I'm going to hear in the comments down below. So please make sure to leave those down there. So let's get started. 5 steps to incredible Warlocks and Patrons. So the very first one is to fully understand what a Warlock is, because a Warlock is different than any other class, but a lot of times people kind of confuse Warlock and Cleric, especially if the Warlock isn't serving some kind of evil entity. They're like, oh, then you're basically just a Cleric. No. Here is the main difference, and I'm really going to focus on Cleric because it's the one that's closest to Warlock. Wizards and Sorcerers are just a different thing. So Warlock, Cleric. Here's the 3 biggest differences. Number 1 is that a Warlock serves a powerful entity. A Cleric serves a god or a deity. This may seem subtle, but it's very important because the two of them are very different. So a Warlock serves either some kind of magical force or a powerful individual, while a Cleric is specifically serving a deity. This rules out a lot of the darker things like Archfey and devils and things like that. Clerics will usually not serve them. However, Warlocks, anything's on the table. Number 2, the difference between Warlocks and Clerics is actually the nature of the relationship with the powerful entity. So because the Clerics serve a god, their powers are considered a gift. There is it's only a one-sided thing. I mean, the god doesn't need anything from the Cleric. They may use them for their purposes occasionally, but they don't need them. However, a Warlock, this is a very different relationship because a Patron is making a pact with the Warlock, which means it's mutually beneficial. So your Patron wants something or needs something from the Warlock, and it's kind of a two-way street. Where the Warlock has quite a bit of bargaining power within the relationship because that deity, that entity needs something from them. And the number 3 big difference is communication. We'll get into that more later, but deities rarely communicate with mortals. They don't need to. Again, everything is a gift from a god, so they really don't need to communicate. So a cleric can go through an entire campaign and maybe only hear once or twice from their god the whole time, whereas a warlock is likely to communicate with their patron far more often because the patron needs something from them, wants something from them, and again, that warlock has a little more bargaining power in that relationship. So those are the major differences. So make sure that your player understands this and that they really want to be a warlock and not something else. Okay, so step number 2, let's look at patrons. This one is, so much fun. So patrons, in the original player's handbook, you have 3 options. Now, there's a lot you can do within these 3 options, but really you only have 3. You can choose an archfey, you can choose a fiend, or you can choose a great one or an ancient one. Within these, archfey, you're looking at the kings and queens of the court, the powerful ones. A lot of times those are going to be tricksters. They're not going to care very much about the player. They're just kind of a means to an end. Same thing with devils and demons. You can make pacts with them for power, but that is going to be very contractual and will be more like making a deal with a devil than anything else. And then finally, the ancient one, that's kind of just a blanket statement for anything way out there where your player doesn't understand what it is that they're dealing with. Think Call of Cthulhu, things like that, Star Spawn, crazy weird stuff. Okay, so if you want to, you can simply pick one of those 3 and go from there. Everything's already lined out for you and all that. However, one of the things I love the most about Warlocks is that you have so many options that you can do. You can homebrew and kind of mix and match a whole bunch of stuff with this. Tasha's actually gives us a couple of fun options for Warlock patrons. So if you don't have a copy of Tasha's yet, you can pick it up down in the description below. I'll put a link there for you. But we've got 2 options for Warlocks that come out of Tasha's that are kind of interesting. One of them is a talisman. This is like an amulet of power that is given to the PC, and as long as they are wearing or have that item, then they have access to their power. I love this. I really enjoy the way that they outline this in Tasha's. However, it's still kind of linked to an individual entity. I would remove it from that and have it be something more like a relic of ancient power that's been lost or forgotten. And the relic requires something in order to keep working. This could be blood, this could be sacrifices, this could be something more lighthearted than that. But it needs something, it requires something from the player, and as long as it gets it, it continues to give the player power. I love that. Also a great option if you have a player who's not that big on backstory and knows that they want to be a warlock but is not really concerned about the patron. Give them an item, give them a book, give them a talisman, something like that. And then as the story goes along, that player finds out about whatever power it is that they are now linked to, good or bad. Never know. So I like that one. Another one is a connection to the elemental planes: water, fire, air, and earth. You can have patrons from there. So noble genies kind of rule over those areas. So you can have a pack specifically with a genie, and there's a really cool genie warlock in here that's actually super awesome that I would recommend if you want to look there. But you can even remove that and simply have the patron be the elemental plane of water. So perhaps your player was a sailor, and one day the ship crashed and they were about to drown, and they came close to a place where the veil between the elemental plane of water and the material plane was very thin, and they accepted that into them. Or perhaps they were in a burning building, and instead of being afraid of the flames, they were drawn towards them, and that is where their power comes from, is directly from the elemental plane. That changes things a little bit, and you'll have to kind of think through the whole relationship that way. But if you have a player who is uncomfortable with the idea of serving a specific entity, especially devils or anything like that, that can be another really cool option. Just be aware that you'll have to do a little bit of home brewing there. So now that you have picked your patron, you know what your patron is going to be. And again, there are so many options here, which is super, super fun. But your number 3 is that you need to pick a pact. A Warlock pact is how Warlocks get their power. And this is where the real fun comes in, because you get to decide, what does your patron want? As a DM, this is a super fun question, because you can literally look through your whole campaign and go, okay, what do I want to draw in? Where do I want my players to go? I'm going to link it into this. Or you can just come up with something really cool, which is the whole reason we're DMs. We like coming up with cool things. So some options could be that this patron is training up the player to be powerful enough to take their place so that they can go and do something else. Perhaps they're in charge of guarding a certain area, or they have a certain task that the gods have given to them, and they're looking for a replacement so they can be free. And so in exchange for power, your player has to eventually take over for them. That could be super fun. Another option could be simply that that entity is looking to gain more power. And so through this patron bond, the players go out and do things that actually bring the patron more and more power. Perhaps they want to be released. Perhaps it is an entity that is trapped somewhere, and they're wanting the player to go around and do certain actions so that they can be unleashed again. Perhaps they simply revel in adventures, and ever since they transcended morality, some of them do transcend morality, but I meant mortality. Ever since they transcended mortality, they haven't gotten that excitement and that feel of adventures. And so they're actually kind of living vicariously through the adventurers, and they demand more and more exciting adventures in exchange for more and more power. Perhaps they simply want to meddle in the lives of mortals. They're a yenta. They just really enjoy kind of messing with mortals, and they want the player to be a part of that. Perhaps they are looking to protect something, and the players need to go out and do certain things in order to protect something. Or perhaps they just like the player. This is the cool thing about Warlocks, is it's literally just up to the entity. Perhaps the entity just found them one day out in the forest and thought they were adorable and decided to protect them. Or perhaps, they did some task and the patron actually fell in love with them, and so is looking to protect them because of that and give them power so that eventually they can join them and maybe, live happily ever after, because wouldn't that be super sweet? Anyway, romantic at heart, but they could just like them and want to be around them and see what they do with the power that they've given. It's as simple as that. But you as the DM, along with your player, you need to figure out a direction here, right? Your players don't need to know the end goal, but it needs to kind of match and align with what the player envisions, or they're not going to like it or enjoy your portrayal of what is happening there. Okay, number 4, when you are considering becoming a warlock, or you are a DM and you have a player that wants to be a warlock, you need to talk about communication expectations. This is a relationship after all, and the basis of any good relationship is communication, which means you have 3 questions to ask. Number 1, how often will the patron communicate or talk to the player? Number 2, how much do they care about these interactions? And number 3, how much are they going to reveal to the players? Obviously, this completely depends on the patron. You could have an oversharer, a patron that's constantly telling them way too much or more than they want to know. Or if it's an ancient being or deep magic, perhaps they only communicate sometimes, and it's all very vague and mysterious. But you need to decide, how are they going to communicate? There's a lot of options here. They can communicate through dreams and visions. They can communicate simply through feelings and urges and desires. They can communicate through something being written down. So think like Tom Riddle in Harry Potter, right? Harry could talk to Tom through the book. You could have something like that for your patron, where the player can write down questions and the patron will answer only through the form of the book. Another super cool thing about Warlocks is that you can actually have face-to-face meetings. So if it is an entity like an archfey, perhaps they just pop up every once in a while and have a face-to-face talk with them. Now, this may not be all the time, but you can do this with Warlocks, which I just think is super fun and I really love it. And then another form of communication is simply rewards and punishments. Rewards when the player does what they are supposed to do and the patron is happy, and punishments when they don't. Perhaps they're being too slow in the patron's mind, or they're not doing what they were commanded to do, right? So how often are they going to communicate? Is this every single time there's a full moon, they have a dream and their patron meets with them? Or is this on an as-needed basis, only when the patron feels like they are doing an exceptionally good job or an exceptionally bad job? How are they going to communicate? Dreams, feelings, visions, flashes of images. How much will they reveal? Are they a very mysterious entity? Or are they very open and truthful about things? Or somewhere in between? And then finally, how much do they care? Are they invested in this relationship? Do they really honestly care about this mortal, or is this mortal just a means to an end? All of that affects communication and how much is communicated and how much isn't. And then finally, number 5, you as the DM specifically need to determine how much this patron is going to affect your overall story. So at any given time, is the story directly opposing or supporting what the patron wants and desires? If they have a goal in mind, is what the party doing, if it's against that goal, are they going to actively go against the party and try and turn the warlock against the party? Or are they just going to kind of bide their time? If it's directly supporting this patron, will the patron give the entire party temporary powers or help them in some way in order to accomplish these goals? How much or how little do you want this patron relationship and pact to actually affect the game as a whole? And then finally, have fun. This should be really, really fun for both you and your player, because this is one of the few classes where you get to have direct interaction with your players as much or as little as you want to. As a DM, we of course have things going on, but it's rarely direct. Warlocks allow us to kind of be a part of the party, which is really fun and really different and out of the ordinary for us. So make sure to have fun with it. Make sure to communicate with your player those expectations, their backstory, how they met their patron, what their patron's kind of like, what they know about them, and then just have fun with it. My last thing that I want to say is a big, huge Halfling thank you to this month's producers. This big list of people over here are all of the people who have produced this video for your enjoyment over on Patreon. So thank you guys so much. Literally can't do this without you. Big heart. That was a terrible heart. Big heart. And until next time, may your game have advantage. Halfling Hannah here, signing out.